Well, Drake, you are the cameraman, the director, the production,
the editor, the lighting guy, the sound guy. Yeah, I'm the one that makes it look good.
Sure, so you pull all of this together. What does that actually look like? I know that we talked to Sinn about sort of her role in blocking and conceptualizing, and I know you all work well together and all of that, but walk me through your role here, I suppose.
Okay, well, my role is to make what they do look really good.
Sure.
Now that consists of making sure that the lighting is good. We don't have weird shadows. I'm a 6'3" man, so I make a lot of shadows. So that was a very big learning curve on my part. Just setting up lights so that I don't look like this weird ominous shadow in the background.
Yeah, I mean, because you're getting in there with the camera.
I'm as in there as you can get. So, yeah, so, what I do essentially is I take what the customer has written down and I make that come to life and make it not boring. Surprisingly enough, you'd be like, how is porn boring when you shoot it? Well, I get bored behind the camera as much as somebody gets bored watching it.
Fair.
There's a lot of fast forwarding through a lot of scenes as you're watching them doing whatever it is that you do because it gets static. So what I try to do is make those static shots enjoyable. I try to put myself in the eyes of the person watching it. And if I get bored, they're probably going to get bored. So, I essentially think of myself as a satellite on legs, meaning that I'm everywhere, anywhere. My height does help in getting a lot of the really fun angles. And it essentially comes down to, making everything look really good beyond what they do. Because what they do is amazing, obviously. But it's not just pointing a camera. It's not just putting a camera on a tripod and walking away from it. There's so much more. And it took me a very long time to get there.
Fair to say, I mean, what did that process look like for you? How did you end up here today?
Oh, that's fun. So, in my life before I met Sinn, I was a diesel mechanic. I felt very exploited being a diesel mechanic. At 28, I had back surgery due to being said mechanic.
Yeah.
And nobody gave a shit. My bosses didn't care. They were only, they only cared that I was gone for 6 months.
Right.
And how this all happened is when I met Sinn, she was a regular performer being on set and, other people, she'd show up, do her job and go on with it. Well, she found me and just about 2 years into it, custom videos started coming around. And she just needed somebody to do it, somebody to film it for her. So she told me the basics of you don't use Zoom. You make sure lighting's good. You make sure that parts of them aren't cut off in the scene, and make it look good. So what are we 7 years into it now, and I feel like I'm just starting to get it. But yeah, huge learning curve from turning wrenches to turning heads.
Yeah, fair to say.
Yeah, it came down to necessity. She needed somebody. I was there, and I was willing to learn. And so I quit being that mechanic, and I started being camera, editing, director, all in one. And trust me, I don't do it all by myself. Sinn's got a whole lot of her fingers in the directing and everything else. But yeah, she kind of taught me the basics of what she found on sets and how she saw things happening, gave me a little info, and I kind of took and ran. A lot of trial and error, a lot of, actually not too many upset customers. Surprisingly not too many upset customers. There's some shots where I'm just like, that was so bad. And then the customer's like, that is the best thing I've ever seen in my life. And I'm like, well, I guess my bad day turned into their good day.
Yeah, I mean, anybody who is sufficiently good at their job spends at least like 5-10% of the time thinking, oh, that could have been better. That should have changed.
That was an awful angle. Where did that come from? you know. But when you see stuff like that, you just change it.
Sure.
That's the nice part about this industry, is that there's nothing so set in stone that you can't play with it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's no specific angle that you need to get for this shot. You just make sure that it looks good. So that's my job.
Yeah, well, so you're trying to keep it hot, you're trying to keep it interesting and film it in a way so that you're not bored.
Right.
With this scene that we just watched, what's it like when you're filming something and you're kind of keying in on where it's hot, on the sexuality, on like the energy of it, when it's not necessarily something that you're particularly interested in or maybe even particularly understand?
And there's a lot that I'm not particularly interested
Fair to say,
in this
yeah,
industry. There's a lot of
specific.
fetishes, and I'm like, I guess I don't get it.
Yeah.
But here I am.
Valid, but not for me.
Right, exactly. And you know, you take somebody's fetish and you take that to heart, because this is why they contacted you. They contacted you to make their fantasy. And they really hope that you do a very good job making their fantasy come to life. So, you know, I really take into account other people's sexuality generally when I do these scenes. If this is foot centric, I'm gonna do every angle to make that foot as pretty as possible. You know, this guy doesn't like just show me the heel. Very rarely. It's like, I love feet, so you make sure you get every little foot, every toe, every, you know, sensual kiss, every, you know, eye look. And this is like, you know, things you don't think about is like these performers are looking at each other in the eye. They're getting into this scene, and you need to capture that. Capture the magic, not just the stuff that's happening. You know, the magic is far beyond.
It's not just the mechanics; it's the energy of it.
Bingo. It's the love, the lusting that you don't always see in porn, because the camera person or the director wants to focus solely on this. You know, I just need the soles of her feet. And you're like, okay, but there's so much more than that. It's like the soles, that's good, and you want to get that. But what about the eyes? You know, what about the giggles? Like you kind of want to get all of that in the shot, not just, you know, the specific fetish.
Sure.
So, getting into some of these fetishes, it's very, very difficult to do when they're not your fetishes. But what you do is you take yourself out of that and you just make sure everything looks good. You make sure that the magic that's happening isn't just her feet. Her feet are magic all on their own. You know, that's going to come out in the video regardless of where you're really pointing the camera, as long as that foot's in the scene. So it's, you know, you're trying to take all of these parts of humanity, parts of love and lust, and find that in some of the strangest places. You know, I keep going to this foot fetish thing. It's very popular, so you tend to see a lot of the foot fetish guys. No two foot fetish guys are the same.
Sure.
You know, some love the soles, some like the toes, some like the feet in places where it's damp and wet. You know, it's there's so much to it, and you can never just go, oh, foot fetish guy, this is what I'm going to do.
So it's when you're making a custom video, like you really are having to make a custom video.
Absolutely.
It's not like you can just take the last one that you shot and put a new name on it.
Yeah, not at all. Not at all. Everyone is very customized to the customer, because everybody is custom. You know, no two minds think identical. You know, we may have the same idea on something, but it's not an identical idea, because my brain doesn't work like yours. It's just how humans work. So you really have to go, okay, this guy's a foot fetish guy, but I see that he kind of wrote this in the custom thing, so I'm going to say that that's probably more important than the last guy, where that wasn't brought up at all. So yeah, you're really finding the magic with the camera. Something that when I first started, I was not aware of at all. You know, I was like, okay, point, click, and go. And now it's like, no, you know, swoop into shots, you want to fade out to shots, you want to make sure that your angles are, you got the golden rule, and you have the rule of threes, and like, how can you mix those to make something beautiful? It's not straightforward. Very rarely do we put our cameras on a tripod. Static shots just don't push the idea of the love, the lust, the fetish.
Yeah, because it's not like a traditional film in the sense that plot and story are maybe present, but they're not nearly as important. There's something more artistic or energetic. I mean, I'm not sure what the right term is here.
Artistic, definitely. We all look through a lens differently. Same lens, we all look through it differently because in our mind, what we're trying to capture is obviously you're trying to get into somebody else's mind, in a sense. Doesn't always work so fluidly, but that is what we strive to do, is to get inside of these people's fantasies, to really make the fantasies come to life. If you want to look at feet, go ahead and go on the internet. There's 7 billion of them, probably, and you're going to get bored just looking at a foot.
Sure.
Just looking at a woman's hands, a man's hands. Hands generally, let's just say generally hands. You're going to get bored at just the stagnant, I can see this anywhere. You really want to bring something more to what we all have on our bodies. You customize everything, you cater to everything you can when it comes to a customer. Obviously, you hear it a million times, the customer is the most important part of this.
Sure.
And without the customer, we wouldn't be doing this. It's not always true, except for somebody's got to buy it. Because we can't do this without people buying our porn, and it's not always porn. Sometimes it's very vanilla. People just want something that you can't get from a big producer. Also, another thing that we try not to do is cut too often. Once you start cutting your scene up, you really lose the authenticity. You lose a lot of that. Wow, this came out so beautiful, and there was no hiccups.
The feeling of like being in the room.
Yeah, exactly. The feeling of being in the room. Not closing your eyes for 5 minutes away. Opening them up and everything's completely different. You really try to get as much of it as if the customer was the one behind the camera, the one that really wants to see what it is. So I really try to step into those shoes and find that foothold.
Does that change at all if you're shooting something that's a little more, maybe silly is the right word? I don't mean to diminish it, but when somebody wants to do like a mind wipe fantasy,
there's lots of silly stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would honestly say probably a third of what we shoot is a little bit more on the cartoonish side.
Sure.
Because as fantasies go, like there's no bigger fantasy than a cartoon. Cartoons are over the top. They make you laugh ridiculously. Cartoons are part of my life. And it's because it's so outlandish.
Right.
So, nothing is very straightforward and, it's all just a little bit of an offshoot. So, comedy and sex mix quite often. Not always in the same scene, but there is something sexual about the comedy that we produce. In some facet. I mean, and everybody takes something else from it. The customer that ordered it and the people that buy it thereafter. Like everybody's going to take something different out of it. So you cater to the masses, and you cater to the individual. It's a very back and forth kind of thing. But you generally just look at making it look good. Fun angles. You do a lot more of that in the silly stuff than you do in porn, for instance. You have a little bit more artistic leeway with the fetishes, the sillier fetishes, compared to the sensual sex. Obviously, two different things, sensuality and silly. They don't exactly go hand in hand, although you can mix the two.
Yeah, or alternate in these different ways.
Bingo. So, have fun, make it look good. Like that's my job. Have fun, make it look good. Don't be boring.
Well, I think about my time in restaurants and just being around food all day, and then being around sort of like the grosser side of food, dirty dishes and all of that kind of stuff. I have to wonder what it's like watching sex, being around sex, editing sex, and like just constantly being in that environment. How it's possible to kind of keep finding that energy, to be looking for things that are still interesting, and to not get bored yourself, so that you're creating something that the consumer's not going to be bored by.
Right. And the great part about this job is no 2 days are exactly alike. No two scenes are exactly alike for that matter. And you find I'm passionate about sex. Mm-hmm. Very passionate. I have been since I can remember. It's always been something that I enjoyed thoroughly, to put it mildly. And it's very difficult to get bored in this industry. Very difficult. So coming into every scene is really coming into it with that, how do I make this look good? How do I make it look sexy? Even if it's already over the top sexy, with a stagnant camera, or just a lazy camera person, you can really make something great look like shit.
Sure. Yeah.
And I'm sure I'm guilty of making something look like shit every once in a while. Nobody believes that except for myself, but here I am, my worst critic, right? So, bringing joy to other people's faces is essentially what we're doing. And as a human being, I enjoy bringing smiles to faces, and bringing boners to dudes, and bringing a wet pair of panties to somebody with a vagina. It's all bringing joy, and I love bringing joy. So there's never bad days, really. You look at it.
Sure. Well, as a sex therapist, I hear what you mean about being passionate about sex. And as we're kind of dispelling all of these rumors about folks being sort of forced into this work, I think it's important to recognize that a sex worker can come from sort of anywhere. But I guess what you're also saying is that not necessarily anybody could do this work, that you have to have a certain drive for it.
You do definitely have a certain drive for it. There's a short lifespan for a lot of these performers.
Sure.
It's because they got into it hoping that it would be something, and it turned out to not be what they were hoping for, and they just can't get into the groove they thought that they would be able to get into when getting into this industry. I came into this industry not really like gun-ho into this industry. I had my own thing, I had my own vanilla jobs and everything else. She asked if I wanted to help her out. Of course, I want to help my girlfriend at the time out. Later became my wife, but that is a different story. And it came out of necessity, not a striving for. So when I got into this industry, it was like, hey, can you help me out occasionally? Sure, absolutely. I can tell you, in this industry, I've never felt exploited. Never, not once, felt exploited. And I do camera, I do editing, I also perform. I generally got my fingers in kind of every bit of this business as much as I can, because, to know it all is to make everything better.
Sure,
if you know how to do this, you can make this better. You know how to do this, you can make this better. It's really been a life-changing learning curve. I went from a very okay, you read out of a book, this is exactly what you do to fix this, to, okay, now make this look good. Generally.
Whatever that means, whatever good is.
Exactly, whatever good is, make it not boring. How about that? That's a better thing. Make it not boring. It's all good. What you're videotaping is, or what you're capturing on camera is good. Make it look good, though. Mm-hmm. Because you can make something really great look really bad very quickly. And and it just takes experience. And experience is everything. You know, when I first started performing in this industry, I was so shy. I would sweat, just constant sweat. You know, a couple of years into it, and I'm like, oh, another fucking day at work, I guess. I'm like, all right, let's go, let's do this. Let's go. So, yeah, huge learning curve. Just trying to focus on other people. You know, my focus is not to, you know, boast myself or make myself feel good at the end of the day, because life just makes me feel good and or bad. What I do for work just helps keep the happier days happier. You know, yeah, life is great. Make sure it looks good on camera.
Fair to say.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything else that you feel like the audience at home may not understand or probably should understand about you, the work that you do, or even just the industry that you're in?
Well, you know, they said it best. We are humans. I am very much just like everyone else. My job is this rather than, you know, that. And I've had my hands in all kinds of jobs. This job is work, 100% work. You know, I just said a minute ago, you know, years into performing, I've gotten to the point where I'm like, okay, well, now let's get to work. And all my friends are super jet like, oh, this is super awesome for you. You get to bang hot chicks all the time. And I'm like, yeah, you know how much work that is?
Yeah.
As a man performing, it is a lot more work than people think. It's not just, you know, getting a boner in front of 12 dudes all like waiting for you to end so they can go home to their family. Is like, you know, that can be a little stressful.
Yeah.
So my stress at work is just as high level as any other job I've ever had. I just don't feel exploited this time. You know, I don't have a job that doesn't, or a boss that doesn't care about me as a person, because my boss cares more about me as a person than anybody's ever cared. You know, so yeah, it's work. It's hard work. It's you know, some of these videos I've edited 10 hours. 10 hours editing one 30-minute clip. Like, there's so much more to this industry than just people fucking and people holding a camera. Holding a camera was what I did the first week I started doing this. Now I make camera work art. And that's, you know, what it is. We are artists. You know, treat us as such. We're not exploited, you know, sex craved, you know, deviants. No, we're normal people that love doing what we do and feel connected by connecting with other people. So that's what we do. We connect. We connect with the people that we have sex with. We connect with the consumers. We connect with people's happiness, you know, essentially.
Yeah. Well, on behalf of consumers everywhere, thank you for your service. Thank you for the work that you do. And thank you so much for just allowing us to kind of poke around and to see everything that you do and what all this looks like.
I would really like more people to see what it looks like behind the camera, because it is not the world that everybody thinks. This is not an easy job. This is not, you know, just a way to go about the day. This is work. It takes a lot of practice. It takes a lot of skill, and it takes a lot of patience. So yeah, that's what I want to get around with. Look behind the camera every once in a while. We're back there.
All right. Well, fair to say. Thank you so much.
Thank you.